Hi, I'm Rob King. Welcome to the channel. Today is Homebrew number 25. It's an extra special bitter, or ESB for short. It's something of an English classic, and we're going to cover everything from grain through to glass. So please do like and subscribe, and I'd love to hear your comments. So this is me from the future letting you know this recipe turned out wonderfully. Good pop there. I do like a good bit of carbonation, and this is the beer. So this really did result in a wonderful end result. Delicious aroma. So drinkable sweetness, but just a little bit of bitterness. Unusual because it's called bitter, it's not really that bitter. Now a little bit about the drink before we begin. Now there are three types of bitter. There is an ordinary bitter which comes in at around 3 to 4%. There is a best bitter which probably is my typical go-to, which comes in a little bit stronger. And then there is the one above that, the ESB. Unfortunately, most places can't call it ESB because Fuller's owns the trademark. So instead of extra strong bitter, they use the term extra special bitter to actually refer to the same drink. Now, actually, this one comes in at around 6%, so it is noticeably stronger. Now, this being a British brew, it is typically formed of British hops, and there are three hop additions to this recipe. Now, the one thing that's of note, of course, is it's not that bitter, so it's not particularly strong on the hops for bitterness or for aroma. So the three hops that we have for this particular brew are, first of all, we have Challenger. Now, Challenger hops offer a pleasant mix of floral and fruity flavours and aromas, and typically contribute well to an overall hop aroma. Fuggles are the second addition. These are classic in many British brews. They impart delicate earthiness and mild floral aroma to the beer. Now, this is something that really does come through in the English ESB, and Fuggles are our 30-minute addition. Finally, and unsurprisingly perhaps, East Kent Goldings, EKG, are our third edition, another classic of British brewing, and they again provide a gentle aroma. You can see this is going to be a very balanced brew. The recipe that we're going to use today is actually a scaled down to 5 litre version of the one provided by Crisp. Now the Crisp recipe does 25 litres, and so simply this is about a 20% of all of the Crisp ingredients. So we have 7.2 litres of bottled water, 1.16 kilograms of Marris Otter, 100 grams of light crystal, 40 grams of Amber Malt, 5 grams of roasted barley, 70 grams of sugar. If you're interested in the equipment for this brew, we have used 2 stock pots, a sieve, a funnel, a measuring jug, a 5 litre fermentation vessel, an airlock and bung, and a nylon bag for straining those grains. We also needed a scales to actually measure out the grains. A few optional items that you can also include: a hydrometer and measuring cylinder to measure the ABV if you're interested. You may also need a wine thief or something similar to extract that into the measuring cylinder. A thermometer just to check that the temperatures are correct before you move to each stage, particularly for pitching the yeast. And a pH meter if you want to check on that pH reading, and we'll talk about that as we go through. Finally, a jeweler scales if you're going to do those small additions like the water adjustments that are very small. You need a very fine level scales to be able to measure that out. Step 1 is cleaning and sanitization. Step 2 is to bring 3.1 litres of water, this is bottled water, up to a strike temperature of 67 degrees. Water chemistry, we are keeping this one a very balanced brew, and we are going to only make 2 additions, one of Epsom salts and one of gypsum. In fact, it's 0.5 grams of Epsom salts given the size of this batch, and 0.7 grams of gypsum. Step 4 is to mash in with our grains. For step 5, we simply want to maintain a mash temperature of 65 degrees for 60 minutes. Step 6, after 15 minutes, we want to take a pH reading. While we're here, give it a good stir. I need to bring the temperature of the sample down to 20 degrees. My icy dad mug is quite a handy way of doing that. Now, if the pH level is now outside of the range 5.2 to 5.5, then we may need to make an adjustment. If that adjustment is to bring the pH down, which technically brings the acidity up, then we will add some additional lactic acid. The pH meter itself is just in distilled water to just clean the lens. .48, we are in the perfect range. All is good. Step number 8 is to bring 4.1 litres of bottled water up to 78 degrees centigrade for the sparge. Time to mix in the sparge water chemicals as well. This is our sparge water, of course. Now I'm going to strain the grains into another pot. We can start bringing this up to the boil while we sparge. While that's heating up, we're going to take a sample for pre-boil gravity. That could go in the fridge to cool down. It's already 90 degrees, won't be long. For our boil then, we are going to add 7 grams of Challenger hops at the 60-minute mark, 3 grams of Fuggles hops at the 30-minute mark, and then finally 7 grams of EKG at flame out. We also have 5 grams of Irish moss at the 10-minute mark and 5 grams of Fermentation at the same time. Our first hops are 7 grams of Challenger. Alexa, set timer 30 minutes. We are halfway through the boil. At 30 minutes, we have 3 grams of Fuggles. We are 10 minutes from the end of the boil and we have 2 additions. The first is 5 grams of Fermentation. And the second is 5 grams of Irish moss for finings. Part of the ingredients for this one also includes 70 grams of sugar, just to bring up the gravity a little. This is flame out. We have our final addition, 7 grams of East Kent Goldings. We're going to let that steep for 20 minutes and then we'll go to cooling. Our pre-boil sample is down to temperature. Wow, even pre-boil, this is a bit high. 148. 5.59. You're okay. Next step is cooling. We need to bring this down to close to 20 degrees. It's currently at 70. So our post-boil volume is 3.5 litres. This is down on what was expected, but I do suspect the gravity is going to be too high. So that's the next step. Yeah, gravity is 1080. So the target gravity is 1052. So I'm going to top up with bottled water. I'll take it to 4.5 litres first, see where we get to. Gravity's still coming up high, but we're down to 160 something. So the gravity is 158, a little high, but I'm happy with that. It's close enough. This hasn't been a particularly strong smelling brew so far, but just pouring it in there now, wow, yes, we're getting there. My last pH reading, 5.44. So our last addition, the London English Ale yeast, is 5 grams left in this packet. That swish, mix it in. Last chance for some oxygenation. Fermentation, I'll probably put that away for a week, see how it's doing, 20 degrees C, and time for clean up. So on to fermentation and temperature control, and something I've wanted to do more of is make sure we get that temperature control just right. So I've bought myself a Fermentator, which sounds absolutely fabulous and actually is really fabulous, but all it does is control the temperature of fermentation, and something the ESB definitely has gained from is that ability to maintain the 20 degrees fermentation temperature. Day one, time for a quick cleanup. Later the same day. This is day 2. It has gone quiet. It definitely looks like 2 layers of truck there at the bottom. day 17 and day 3 respectively. Quite cloudy, but this is a dark bitter. Fermentation wasn't particularly vigorous, so I'm hoping that it has fermented down to the right gravity, so we're going to check. Otherwise, this is going to go back for a little longer. Okay, so how are we getting along with the fermentation? We're on day 6. That's actually looking pretty close to what we're looking for. Maybe just a smidge high, but not far off. So it looks like we're on 1018. The temperature control also let me do a cold crash. The cold crash is to reduce it down to 3 degrees for just a few days. That cold crash really helps with clarity. It worked out really well, as you can see, and effectively means I didn't need to use any finings on this particular brew. It's day 12 and it's had 3 days of cold crashing. Given the really warm weather we've had recently, having the fermentation chamber was really quite handy. You can sort of still see the condensation there where I've taken out just a little while ago. I did think that I would need to use some finings on this, but having cold crashed it, I now think possibly not. It is looking pretty good. So I'm going to do a double check on the final gravity and then actually transfer here and just check the clarity to then really decide what the next step is going to be. Now the gravity's come down, but I've just realised the temperature is very cold, so I'm going to put that to one side, wait for it to warm up. I lost a little bit there at the bottom, but I'm happy with that for clarity of this. That looks rather splendid. There's a lot of headspace there, so I'm going to hit this with a bit of CO2 and then put an airlock back in. I think we can safely say this regulator is on its way out. So here we are at bottling then, and I made the decision for this one to bottle carbonate. Now I have been enjoying carbonation in the kegs for some time, so it was a bit of a change of heart. And after the wherry, where I really did cut it quite fine in terms of the amount of sugar I added for carbonation, I played it a little safer this time with the 5 grams per litre calculation for the amount of sugar added. So I added 16 grams of sugar because it was about 3.1 litres in that final vessel, and that's what gave us the wonderful pop and the wonderful carbonation that you heard earlier. This is 15 grams of sugar. We're going with 5 grams per litre, roughly 3 litres to carbonate. This is double the quantity I used on the wherry. We have here a sugar wash. I've just added a tiny amount of boiled water. The water's cooled now. bottom, this is pretty clear. My temporary extra hand. Cheers everyone, come back for the evaluation in about a week. Good health. So, how did the evaluation come? Well, let's have a listen. When this went in the bottle, it looked fantastic. It's now had 2 weeks of conditioning and 2 days in the fridge. So, let's see how it's all turned out. Nice little pop. Lovely colour. Wow, it does look good. Oh gosh, on the nose it smells absolutely delicious. Very malty, very much in the bitter style. Gosh, I've got to try this. These days I think I do prefer an IPA. And an IPA probably has more of a bitter hit really from the hops, whereas a bitter, oddly enough, has much less of a bitter sort of hit to it. There is a nice balanced bitter taste to it, you know, as it goes down it just hits the spot perfectly. Gosh. In terms of mouthfeel as well, you know, it definitely has that fullness of body in the mouth. It's not a light sort of drink. If you are a fan of an English bitter, this one turned out well. Anyway, evaluation, oh, this could certainly be one of my new favourite beers. And we're on to the lessons learned. Hi, and finally welcome to our lessons learned. And we've got a few to take away from us today. The first one is brew house efficiency. Now, brew house efficiency explains how much you get out of the mash, you know, for your bang for the buck for your grains in terms of the final gravity. Now, in my calculation, I use 65% as my brew house efficiency, and after doing this brew, I actually recalculated and it came out at 72%. And hence, the impact of this is that the final gravity was much higher than expected. I got more bang for my buck out of those grains. This also impacts the boil. As you go through the boil stage and boil off some of the water, effectively your wort increases in gravity. So once again, if you boil more off, which is what happened, effectively you end up with less volume and too high a gravity. Again, two things that happened to me in this brew. Lesson number 2 then is partly the solution to that problem if it happens, and it has happened to me a few times before. And so for the very first time I added dilution prior to fermentation. So I added some extra bottled water in to dilute that wort, bring the gravity to the level that I wanted, and then continue with fermentation, and the end result was perfect. Lesson number 3, I forgot to add the dextrose at the end of the boil. No big deal, because I added it a bit later on prior to fermentation. However, it did raise a question that given that the ABV or gravity was a bit high, I could have added a little less dextrose. It didn't matter, lesson number 2, I diluted anyway, but it would have given me that opportunity if I'd have realised. Lesson number 4 is more of a note to self and the BJCP style guidelines. After the dilution and the final gravity was finally in, I did still end up within the BJCP guidelines just about. Whereas if I'd have actually not diluted and gone over, I would have technically no longer been an ESB style, although it would have been extra strong for sure. Lesson number 5 was the bottling or bottle conditioning. Now I have shied away a little bit from bottle conditioning for a couple of reasons. One is the clarity and 2 is the sediment that you often find in the bottles if you do it that way. However, the improved temperature control gave me the confidence that actually this would work okay in bottle conditioning. And well, yes it did. There is a little bit of sediment that you can sort of see there in the bottle that's there, but actually for the most part, wonderful result. Lesson number 6, I've mentioned it before, temperature control in the Fermentator was a great addition to the arsenal, and I look forward to using that again shortly for a lager. Lesson number 7, on a very similar vein, is cold crashing, and very easy to do when you've got a Fermentator in your room. My final lesson, not particularly a lesson, is I would definitely brew this beer again. It tastes wonderful. It came out perfectly in the style of a bitter, the one that we're going for. It does have that sweetness. It does have a little that bitter aftertaste, but it's really quite mild. It's not very bitter at all, in fact. Thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe. Please do comment. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And I'm still new to homebrewing, relatively speaking, learning as I go. So tell me all the new things that I can find out. And I hope to see you back here again soon. Thank you. We have 100 kilograms. No, we don't. So here we are. How's the fermentation get along? It's effectively day 7. Okay, how are we getting along? It's effectively day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.